Yeah. So, welcome to Small Ball. We are live today on a Sunday. So these Sunday shows have been they've become sort of a staple of what we do here on Small Ball. But we're back. We're live. I'm going to notify the world that we are live, so that everybody knows to come and tune into this wonderful show. Thank you for joining me. We got some stuff to talk about. I mean, as I'm sure you could have imagined, we have some stuff to talk about today. So thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to notify the world again. I got a lot of stuff, but I am absolutely more than willing to take questions from my audience. So if at any point during today's program you have something you want to ask, feel free to do so in the comments, and I will try to address it. Now, unfortunately, last couple of weeks, I would say, pretty much since the restart, we had that long 2-month hiatus from Small Ball. Since then, we haven't been doing a lot of fun segments, right? It's been a lot of just me talking. We've done some Q&As, which are fun. But it's been a lot of, just kind of me saying what I want to say. Now, I thought today we could do kind of like a fun segment to start off the show, but not only a fun segment, a segment that is quite contrary to that concept of me just saying what I want to say. So let's waste no time. Let's get right into it. And I'm gonna start the show today with this. So every year, things happen. Every year looks different, right? Every year we see things we've never seen before, and what have you. So we all have our opinions. Generally we think along the same lines, and we think things that are similar to each other. But every year, I think, things change. And this was obviously a unique season, but I think it was a season that we can learn a lot from, as we can every season. So I'm going to bring to you, to start off the show today, 5 things that let's say 5 things that this season, 2020 season, changed my mind about. Okay? So we're coming back to these lists, right? We used to do lists. Here's another list. It's 5 things that before the season started, let's say, I guess we can say when it actually started, or we could even say when it was scheduled to start back in March. But let's say it was about 3 months ago the season started. So that day to today, 5 things that I think differently about because of what I saw in 2020. And of course, the season's not over yet, but it just about is, and I think it's a good time to address this stuff. So number 1 is the Cincinnati Reds. Okay. So at the beginning of the season, and even well into the offseason, I was very high on the Reds, as were many. We look at the Reds, right? And there's a very clear picture of what they are coming into this season. It is a young team with a lot of young talent that's, to this point, has not been ready to have success in the major leagues. Okay. They add veteran talent, Mike Moustakas, Nick Castellanos, Sonny Gray at last year's deadline, Trevor Bauer as well. So, and again, it's a unique season. It's a short season, and it's a division, the NL Central, that is extremely weak. Okay, so we all look at the Reds, myself included, and we see a team that this is the year that they're going to turn the page and sneak into the playoffs for the first time in a while. But things didn't go that way. And they did make the playoffs, but it was an expanded playoffs. They barely made the playoffs. They needed a monstrous comeback. I mean, halfway through the season, it looked like they had no shot. They ended up going on a really nice run and making the playoffs, but had an embarrassing series in the wild card round. So here's what I think differently about regarding the Reds after seeing what I saw in 2020. And it's that leadership and veteran leadership do not go hand in hand. Okay? So we see a team, like I said, that's young, that has talent, but is too young and too inexperienced to do anything of note. That is why when they bring in Trevor Bauer, when they bring in Sonny Gray, when they bring in Moustakas Castellanos, and already have Joey Votto, that's why it's so obvious to us that all of a sudden they become a team to be feared. Now, what kind of players are we dealing with? The players that I just mentioned. Well, this is Trevor Bauer, who we talked about numerous times on this show. I don't think he is a winning player. He is a very talented player, led the league, of course, in NL ERA, in ERA in general, actually. But he was 5-5, including his one start in the postseason. And there are things that come along with that. I think that his pitching talent is excellent, but he doesn't have, I don't think, the makeup to make players around him better. And I'm not going to get too specifically into that. But Sonny Gray is very similar in that regard. Joey Votto has been in that organization for his entire lengthy career and has not gotten along with really any of the, I don't want to say hasn't gotten along with, but hasn't really worked and gelled with the younger players that have come in. We've seen a lot of young players come in that were quickly on their way out of Cincinnati. And they had Moustakas, who I like a lot, World Series champion in 2015, and Nick Castellanos from a franchise in Detroit. I mean, he came from the Cubs, but only played half a season there after last year's deadline. Coming from a franchise, the Cubs did not make the playoffs last year, and then previously Detroit, who has had no playoff experience or anything close to it in his tenure there. So we see this young team adding these veterans, and we think, okay, there was talent already. Now these players are developing, and these players now have people to help them in the right direction, help lead them to the postseason. And again, they did make the postseason, but traditionally, with a 5-6 team even playoffs, they would not have. So again, we have to look at who these players are. And I don't think, looking back, that these are players, veteran players, that are great leaders. Secondarily to that, I don't think these young players, Nick Senzel, Aristides Aquino, Tyler Stevenson, Shogo Akiyama, the free agent signing, I don't think any of these guys are what I thought they would be as far as their talent. I think Nick Senzel, second overall pick back in 2016, out of Tennessee, I thought was a reach by the Reds at number 2. And I think they see him as a second overall kind of guy, but I thought he was more of a mid-first round pick. And it looks like that at this point in time. Number 2. So we see the Rays in the World Series. We see the Braves as about as close to the World Series as you could have gotten, blowing a 3-1 lead in the championship series. Now, these two teams were first and third, respectively, in strikeouts in 2020 in the regular season. So this is something that, we talk about constantly on this show. The balance between strikeouts, home runs, run creation, run production. So here's what I thought previously, is that you can get by in the regular season by hitting a lot of home runs, by having power and things of that nature. But if you can't make consistent contact, postseason pitchers will carve you up and you will not be able to create runs in the postseason. So what I now believe to be true, and what I did not realize until looking at teams like the Braves, the Rays, the Yankees back in 2018-17, the Dodgers, at times last couple of years, is that I don't think anymore that run creation and strikeouts are mutually exclusive. And run creation, that doesn't mean literally the creation of runs. What I mean by that is generating runs without the home run or, less specifically power. Because, oftentimes we see teams with that power that in the postseason are not able to create enough offense because they simply just cannot make enough contact and they strike out far too much. But these are two very unique teams, the Rays and the Braves, that, like I said, do strike out a lot. But they do so much on the base paths. I think the Braves are well coached, not so much the Rays. And they have speed. They have energy. They have talented young players. And, of course, power as well. That certainly helps. Not going to deny that. But these are two teams that were able to create a ton of runs. Now, the Braves actually led the league in batting average in 2020, despite striking out the third most of any team. So I kind of put all of these high strikeout teams into a bubble previously and sort of neglected, any shot that they would have had at creating runs. So there are ways to create runs if you strike out so much. I do think that the Rays now going up against the Dodgers, who struck out the fourth fewest times in 2020, are overmatched in this series. But just because you strike out a lot, I do think it's a large detriment. But there are other ways to create runs, stringing hits, base running, things like that. Because the Braves put a lot of people on base. They aren't necessarily great at getting them in. But it's not, I don't think, anymore just strikeouts and home runs versus contact and hits. Nowadays, I think we're seeing a lot of everything. And it's one big gumbo of stats that we have to look at on a broader scale. Number 3. And my audience, you guys, largely made up of Yankee fans. So you guys love when I talk Yankees. And Aaron Boone has been the manager for 3 years. And for the first 2, of course, being 2018 and 2019, he actually was the only manager in Major League history to win 100-plus games in his first 2 seasons. And I think his reputation was pretty good, to say the least, leading up to this season, coming into 2020. Now, I have been not as impressed with what I've seen from him in his first 2 years. I thought that the energy that was there in 2017 was diminished in 2018 and less so, but still in 2019. I thought that the bullpen was oddly managed. I thought that a lot of the young starting pitchers that could not figure it out, he had something to do with that. So now we look back on 2020, and I think I'm ready to trust Aaron Boone as a manager, because when we talk about our managers, we did our manager grades, we did our managerial hire, fire stuff back in the offseason. And the 3 things that I use to analyze managers, not use, but the 3 things that I look at are getting your players playing to their fullest potential, creating energy, team dynamic, chemistry, things like that. And then, of course, in-game decision making. Now, I think in-game decision making, he has improved. I think at the beginning of his career, his young career, he was very analytical, by the book, and now I think less so. I do think he's taking a lot more risks. I do think that he's being a lot more creative. And I think that as far as the team energy, team chemistry, things of that nature, I mean, this is a wildly different team. First of all, the Yankees were 19th in strikeouts this year. They had the 19th most strikeouts in 2020. That's, following the 2 seasons of Aaron Boone, where they were, thought of as potentially the worst contact team in recent memory, if not Major League history. So it's a wildly different offense, at least, from the eye test and statistically speaking. And I think the energy defensively, he's made a lot of guys work defensively. Clint Frazier is a Gold Glove finalist, believe it or not. Guys like Luke Voit, okay, these are not guys, Kyle Higashioka, these are not guys that we think of as talented defensive players, but he's made it work, okay? He's put pieces around them to make it work, and I think they, individually have improved as well. So I think I've changed my opinion on Aaron Boone. That's number 3. Number 4. This one's kind of odd. I don't really know what to call this one. But I'll try to put it in the simplest terms as I can. I used to think that, okay, so we look at hitters. A lot of people like to use WAR to rank, analyze their hitters. And for a lot of people, the higher your WAR, the better a player you are. So obviously, you guys know this, I'm not that kind of person. And for hitters, I think there are tens of stats that you need to look at to properly and adequately analyze a position player. Now, on the other side of things, pitchers, I used to think that if your ERA was better than another pitcher's, you were a better pitcher. Okay, I think that ERA is one of the few stats in sports that is precisely what you're looking for. The amount of runs that a pitcher gives up. That is as good of a stat, as good of a benchmark as you can get. Think about that. That's what you're looking for in a pitcher, is how few runs can he give up, and that's what ERA tracks. Now, a lot of people say, well, there are other factors. 2 things I have to say about that. Number 1, I now agree. They aren't quite the factors that I think, a lot of people often talk about. People talk about defense. I agree with that. I do think now we have to look at other factors. So I'll give you an example. Shane Bieber, Cleveland Indians, dominates the regular season. He'll go on to win Cy Young. Do I think Shane Bieber is an elite pitcher? No. And it sounds crazy to say. But if I'm starting, if I can pick my team and I can pick a 5-man rotation, he would not make the cut. So why did he have such a prolific season? Well, his catching tandem consists of Roberto Perez and Sandy Leon. 2 of the 3, if not 2 of the 2 best defensive catchers in baseball, not only physically, but also mentally. Terry Francona as a manager, one of the best defensive and pitching managers in Major League Baseball, and a pitching staff pitching coaching staff as well that has dominated the American League for about 10 years. I mean, we have seen countless Indians pitchers blossom in Cleveland and become from not even average. I mean, we're talking guys like Aaron Savale and Mike Clevenger, who used to be spot starters who could not find a role on a major league team. I mean, it was not long ago that Mike Clevenger was a borderline 5 who was a spot starter up and down, in and out of the minor leagues. I mean, this was 2 years ago. I mean, it was not that long ago. Now, this year, he's a trade deadline piece. He gets moved to San Diego. And I think he will have less success there because he doesn't have those factors that we're talking about. So that's number one. I do agree now that there are other factors: defense, coaching. I mean, we all acknowledge, our Coors Fields, our Chase Fields, and our different ballparks. I mean, I think we always acknowledge that as well. Even I acknowledge that a Rockies pitcher's ERA is different than a Tigers pitcher's ERA. But there's another piece. Because, of course, when we're analyzing players, we're trying to analyze their value. And by value, we mean how many wins, essentially, do they produce? I mean, how do they affect our team's chances of winning, and I think more specifically winning a championship? So ERA, I used to think, was a very good barometer of that. Because if you're a pitcher and you give up fewer runs, you are more valuable, which is still true. However, the other likely Cy Young winner in the National League, the other likely Cy Young winner, rather, from the National League, Trevor Bauer. Talked about Trevor Bauer the other day. This is a guy with a 1.73 ERA. The only pitcher in the National League with a sub-2 ERA in 2020, and he cleared that mark by a pretty significant margin, 27 points. So we would think that he's easily, at least in the National League, the most valuable pitcher. But there's more to it. He was 5-5 during the 2020 season, 5-4 in the regular season, 0-1 in the postseason. He's not a winning player. Okay? There's more to your value than what you're able to do on the field. I mean, it's frank and it's clear at this point. A lot of you refuse to believe this, but what you do with a baseball, if you're a pitcher, and what you do with a bat if you're a hitter, or a glove if you're a fielder, is not the extent of your impact on a Major League Baseball team. It's not. And Trevor Bauer is a very unique personality. He is, I don't think, and again, I'm not in there, right? I'm not in the dugout. I don't know all this stuff. So I don't want to, rip on Trevor Bauer for things I'm not 100% sure about. But my viewpoint, my estimation is that he is not a very supportive. Sounds negative. I don't mean I'm having a hard time finding the appropriate words here. But what I'm trying to say is that he doesn't feel like a player. And there are a lot of players like this. It's not just him. But he doesn't feel like a player that tries to have an impact on the other players around him. I think that's the best way of putting it. Okay? Because it's not, it is negative, but I'm not trying to sound harsh. It's sounding a lot harsher than I am intending. He doesn't seem like a player that feels like he can make other players better. Because if you're a player, if you're a pitcher, let's say, and you come in from your pitching into the dugout. Now your lineup has to go out and hit. Okay? You can have an impact on that lineup, whether that's positive, whether that's negative, or you can sit back and do nothing. He seems like a guy who sits back, focuses on what he has to do, and goes out and tries to execute it. And there's something to be said for that. I mean, maybe if he didn't do that, he wouldn't have as much of the on-field success. But I think the winning players, and the reason why he's 5-5, and a guy like Yu Darvish has 8 wins, right? And a guy like Shane Bieber has 8 wins. Yu Darvish, I think, has 6, actually. I got those two confused. But I feel like he kind of sits back rather than supporting his lineup, helping them, prepare for their at-bats, getting them excited. That's just my viewpoint. So when we look at ERA, there's 2 things that I failed to acknowledge, one of which you guys told me and I rejected it, which was that there are other factors. There's catchers, there's defense, there's coaching, there's environment. I rejected some of those things. Now I accept them. And the other one that I kind of came up with and I haven't heard before, except from some very old school, long-time baseball people, is that you can get guys out. You can strike people out. You can limit the runs being scored against you. But there is more to winning than that if you're a pitcher. And number 5. Do I even need to say it? Speaking of, there's more to it than what you're able to do on the field. Speaking of, before the 2018 season, there was an argument that was largely discussed. And it was the argument of Aaron Judge, who was the 2017, a lot of people think of him as the MVP, runner-up in MVP in reality to Jose Altuve, and of course, Rookie of the Year, versus Mookie Betts. So there's Yankees, Red Sox, 2 stars. Who's better? And I heard this argument. A lot of people asked me, who do you think? Judge, Betts? And I said, it's not close. It's Mookie Betts. In fact, I think Mookie Betts is the best all-around player in the world. The best baseball player in the world. That's what I said pre-2018. And people said, whoa. I understand the creativity, the confidence, the hot take. But that's a little much. So, all right. Mookie Betts then goes on in 2018 to have the best season that I have ever seen in my lifetime. The best the best season from a position player in this century. In that 2018 season, he became the first player in Major League history to win an MVP, batting title, World Series, Silver Slugger, Gold Glove, all in the same season. First time that's happened in Major League history. So a lot of people came back to me and said, wow, I guess you were right. Or at least it's a conversation. Because a lot of people weren't ready to admit it, that Mookie Betts was the best player in the world. But at least it's now a conversation between him and Mike Trout. 2019 rolls around, and Betts has a good but not outstanding season. And Trout has a very good season as well. So since that 2018 season, I have let the media, you, my viewers, I have let people pollute my mind into thinking that Mookie Betts isn't quite on the same level as Mike Trout. Well, those days are over. Because when you look at it, outside of OPS, there are not a lot of pieces of evidence to convince me that Mike Trout is a better player. Now, OPS is probably the thing that most of you look at the most when analyzing players. That is how a lot of baseball people analyze players as well. And I'm not going to go in depth about this particular argument because I did that during our last show. You can go back and look at that. But at this point in time, I have changed my mind. Again, I have flipped back and forth, and I have realized that I was right in the beginning. Mookie Betts is the best baseball player on the planet. End of conversation. I don't think it's a debate anymore. I kind of just put them in the same category because of, like I said, the media and everybody convincing me that they're not close, that Mike Trout is clearly the superior player. And it looked to me like Mookie Betts was, so I kind of just put those two. I mean, they canceled them out. They canceled it out, and I put them in the same category. Well, enough is enough. I'm no longer going to let the media, the baseball writers, make that decision for me. I am going to make the decision for myself. Who is the best baseball player in the world? And it has become evident and obvious to me that it's Mookie Betts. That's going to do it for today's show. That one segment lasted the entirety of the show. So, unfortunately, we could not get to some other things that we had planned, which we will. I would say probably Tuesday, I would think. Probably not tomorrow. It's possible, but I think Tuesday. And Tuesday, of course, as always, we should have a Tuesday top 10. And I will leave you with this. Tyler Glasnow against Clayton Kershaw tonight in Game 5 is a pitching matchup. I mean, I can't remember being more interested in a pitching matchup. I can't remember the last time I was this interested in a pitching matchup. So when we have Tyler Glasnow, who I said was going to be the best American League pitcher, next 5-10 years going forward, has not had, the success that I thought he would. I mean, he looks like a very, very good pitcher, but at this point, there is still some room, for improvement. And Clayton Kershaw, obviously, we know his story in the postseason. So I'm very curious to see both pitchers, if they can overcome what they need to overcome or if they will be held down by what has traditionally held them down. And in Clayton Kershaw, that is clearly the postseason and the pressure that comes along with it. And Tyler Glasnow, I don't think, has the command of a Cy Young level pitcher at this point. But both of them at times have shown an ability to overcome those things. And when they do, they are virtually unhittable. So after an incredible Game 4, I'm really looking forward to Game 5. So thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of the World Series. We will almost certainly have a show before the World Series concludes. So have a healthy, happy, and safe rest of your Sunday and weekend. My best guess for our next show is Tuesday. But as always, I will let you know on the Small Ball Instagram. So follow that if you don't already and you are able. Like, subscribe, comment, and recommend this this stream/channel if you feel inclined to do so. And thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's show, a matinee edition of Small Ball on a Sunday. Thanks for watching. Take care. Peace.